Hello and a very warm welcome. This is the news on NTA International. My name is Justin Abemuyi, and here are the top stories. Outgoing President of Burundi, Pierre Nkurunziza, dies at 55. Over 10,000 farmers in 13 states receive improved seeds to boost food production. Plus, Federal Fire Service continues efficiency drive with inauguration of new firefighting trucks. Well, thank you very much for joining us. We begin rather on a sad note where Burundi's outgoing President Pierre Nkurunziza has died at 55 at Karusi Hospital after suffering heart attack. In a statement on Tuesday, the government announced with great sorrow to Burundians and the international community the passing of Nkurunziza. Musa Babali reports.
When the East African Legislative Assembly
Pierre Nkurunziza has been in power in Burundi since 2015. He was the chairman of the National Council for the Defense of Democracy Forces, the ruling party, until he was elected as president of Burundi. 5 years ago, Mr. Nkurunziza's third term began amid political turmoil and had sparked anger, and some questioned on its legality. There was failed coup attempt. Hundreds of people died in clashes, and tens of thousands fled the country. After a change in the constitution, he was able to run for a further term in last month's election, but he decided to retire and was to be known as the supreme guide to patriotism. His election in 2015, with nearly 70% of the vote, was described as a joke by opposition leader Agathon Rwasa, who boycotted the poll. He was admitted in hospital on Saturday after feeling unwell. His condition improved, but on Monday he had cardiac arrest and efforts to revive him were unsuccessful, the government says. On his death, he had been president for 15 years.
And we have in the studio a political scientist, Dr. Sadiq Abba, to examine issues surrounding Burundi and the death of President Pierre Nkurunziza. Dr. Sadiq Abba, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
Now, could you give us your perspective on the political issues in Burundi?
First and foremost, I think I wish to seize this opportunity to condole the people and government of Burundi over the sad loss of Pierre Nkurunziza. Also, I wish to extend this, to the AU leaders. On the face of the political situations in Burundi today, there are 2 to 3 scenarios. Number one, there's going to be a power vacuum with the sudden exit of Nkurunziza. Number two, there's going to be crisis of succession between the various power horses that have been struggling to oust and to take off from Nkurunziza. And three, also, we await to see the role that the AU is going to play in dousing tension and making the succession process not only easier but faster. So if you look at the first scenario, first case scenario in Burundi, you'll come to realize that Nkurunziza, despite all his flaws and limitations, was able to stabilize the country for 15 years. It was like a novelty to an average Burundian, because before he came to power in 2005, Burundi was a theater of war, crisis and conflict. So, but when he came in 2005, at least he was able to stabilize the country. Farmers can go to their farms, miners can go to their mines fields, businesses are opened, some industries are being, small industries are being established. So he laid a very fragile but promising foundations for economic development in Burundi. despite the fact that he did a lot in stabilizing the country, he did very little or nothing at all in laying a very solid foundation for political processes in Burundi, especially the democratic processes in Burundi.
He did a lot, you said. So what legacies do you think late President Nkurunziza would be remembered for?
I think I have said it loud and clear. I think the first legacy Burundians will forever be grateful to Nkurunziza is his ability and capacity to maintain peace and stability and to allow economic activities and processes to thrive in Burundi. If you know the history of Burundi before 2005, especially from 1993 to 2005, over almost 12 years, it was hectic, it was bloody, it was inhuman. But at least he came, he saw and he conquered those particular conflict and crises and established a semblance of a country and a semblance of a nation. And that's the first legacy. The second legacy is that as poor as Burundi is, Nkurunziza was able to, despite all challenges externally and internally, was able to at least keep the economy going, though at a very slow or a snail pace process. But at least we owe it to him that for the first time in so long a time, here comes a president who understands the internal dynamics and the conflictual philosophies of his people, and were able to call the warlords and the conflicting generals into order, and they responded. And for the first time in 12 years, people could go to their farms. Oh, okay. Burundi is an agrarian country that depends wholly on agriculture, even as subsistence farming. So those are his legacies.
Unfortunately, he's now gone. What kind of changes are you expecting in Burundi following the death of President Nkurunziza?
I think this question addresses primarily and fundamentally the political changes. I think there are three opposition leaders that had wanted to oust him at all costs, which he survived, and which he promised to abdicate by August this year, even because of these incidental happenstances. I think the first challenge is that the National Assembly President, who has been the key figure in the opposition, I think will play a very central role. He is going to superintend the country for 2 months and allow elections to hold in Burundi. And then the question is this: as an African or as a Burundian, how just, how fair, and how democratic is the National Assembly President going to be in these 2 months? Okay. Is he going to allow his interest to have conflict with the national interest? Is he going to allow free, fair, and credible processes, democratic processes, to unwind in Burundi, so that at least Burundians will go and elect their own leader happily and joyfully? Or is he going to now change the system?
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you so much, Dr. Sadiq Abba. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us on NTA International.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Well, Dr. Sadiq Abba, they're a political scientist on the death of Nkurunziza, Burundi's president. Now, moving on, a human rights group in Nigeria has urged the United States to practice what it preaches in respect to equality by all, despite race or religion. This was during a protest to the American embassy in Nigeria over the killing of a black American, George Floyd, which triggered a worldwide protest. Mio Gidi reports.
Pinned down on the neck for about 9 minutes, and he later died. That is the sad story of a black American, George Floyd. Sadly, that action of just 9 minutes has sparked of international protest. For instance, here in Nigeria, some groups have come to the United States of America embassy to register their grievance. No songs, rallies, or demonstrations. Just the small numerical strength in line with the guidelines of the COVID-19 of a gathering not more than 20 persons. But there was a strength in the message with the hashtag Black Lives Matter. With faces expressing anger and with steps determined to reach its destination, they made it to the American embassy. Expectedly, security beefed up and the protest could not go beyond the security post. But the message goes beyond the barricades.
We call on the United States government to retrace its steps and practice what it preaches across the world by ensuring the protection of the civil rights of blacks and other people of color in America.
5-paragraph protest letter handed over to a representative of the U.S. Embassy, though no response from him. But the protesters advised such brutality signals frosty relationship between the U.S. and other countries and must be addressed. Mie Ogidi, NTA.
Now joining us via Skype from the state of Indiana, United States of America, is a Nigerian-American Ann Zaku Bamidele to discuss the aftermath of the protests that have greeted the killing of a black American, George Floyd. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Ann Zaku.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, what is the general perspective of racism in the United States?
Racism in the United States, it seems it's not for an African or an African American, generally blacks. You cannot escape that. It is seen everywhere. It is seen in workplaces, it is seen in businesses, as well as school systems.
Well, would you say the killing of George Floyd has further raised the consciousness of Americans on the need to end elements of discrimination?
Yes, I would say it has really raised a lot of consciousness among the Americans. At least some of the Americans are now opening their eyes to seeing the horrors of discrimination against blacks. So it has really raised the consciousness of racism all over the country, at least for some who are willing and have an open heart to it.
Now, relatively taking a look at reactions from around the world right now, what does these reactions, what do they imply for the world?
Reactions around the world has been very supportive. It just tells me, as a black person in the United States and as a citizen walking around and doing day-to-day tasks, that the world is opening their eyes, also recognizing the need to support this movement of racism. And with the world support of the movement, I think we have a chance to end racism or reduce it to its lowest possible impact on the blacks.
Well, from a critical view of things, in your opinion, what would you say has been the positives from these protests?
From my own perspective, the positive thing coming out of this protest, you will notice, or as far as I've noticed, is more unity between the blacks and the whites. Now, and you see that when you go to protests, you will see blacks, whites, and other races all coming together, uniting to fight against racism on blacks generally. And you will even notice the unity now with police also marching along with protesters in support to fight racism in the United States.
Well, Ann Bamidele, thank you so very much for joining us. Thank you so much for your thoughts.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for having me.
All right. Now, that was Ann Bamidele from Indiana, United States of America. Now, moving on, the Senate has considered the bill that seeks to further provide the Nigerian local content development regulation and strict enforcement in all sectors of the Nigerian economy, especially in ministries, departments and agencies of government. The bill, which has passed second reading, also seeks to establish a committee that will be headed by the Vice President and to also establish local content departments in ministries, departments and agencies of government. The bill that seeks to establish Erosion Control Prevention Commission also passed second reading. 6 bills passed first reading. These include the Infrastructure Development Bill, National Oil and Gas Museum and Research Center, Oloibiri, and the Emergency Economic Stimulus Bill 2020. The Senate has confirmed the nomination of Diana Okonta and Yana Talib Yaro as non-executive directors of the Nigerian Deposit Insurance Corporation and that of Professor Jome Audi as Chairman Basi Basi Dan Abia and Mohammed Ibrahim as members of the Nigerian Law Reform Commission, while Ebele Chima did not appear for the screening and therefore was not confirmed. The legislators received President Muhammadu Buhari's request for the confirmation of Justice Monica Dogman Menson as President Court of Appeal. Now, you're watching the news on NTA International. We'll take a short break now. The news continues shortly.
The number of the COVID-19 cases in Nigeria is increasing daily, with many more tests ongoing. The battle of testing, isolating, treating, and attending to the affected persons rests heavily on the shoulders of our health workers, constantly putting their lives on the line and at risk to contain this virus, save and protect the lives of millions of Nigerians. To these health workers, we at the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, on behalf of millions of Nigerians, say a big thank you for all that you have done and are doing. To the security agencies enforcing the lockdown and every other frontliner, we say thank you for putting your lives on the line to save ours. There is no amount of words that can quantify our gratitude. Thank you. This message is brought to you by the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, Africa's largest television network.
Welcome back. And still coming from the National Assembly, it was a day of all black at plenary Tuesday as House members wore black attires to register solidarity and show sadness over incidences of rape and violence against women. House Speaker Femi Gbajabiamila says the House will also send out sensitization video messages of members to their constituents as part of advocacy towards achieving zero tolerance of such deviant behavior. Among matters tabled and adopted at plenary is the need to stop illegal movement of herdsmen from other African countries into Nigeria, considering the escalation of conflict between herders and local farmers in parts of the country. Meanwhile, following a motion from Representative Ahmed Jaha Babao, the House has commended DCP Abakari for outstanding performance in fighting organized crime and invited him for a special recognition at plenary. The number of positive cases of COVID-19 in Nigeria jumped past 12,000 as global cases surpass 7 million. Adebola Brooksland Sunday has these and more on Global Update.
Globally, 7,249,267 persons have been infected with COVID-19, while 410,068 have died and 3,566,987 persons have recovered. This is from the COVID-19 dashboard of Worldometer at about 7 p.m. local time. The World Health Organization says the spread of coronavirus by asymptomatic patients appears to be rare.
If we actually followed all of the symptomatic cases, isolated those cases, followed the contacts and quarantined those contacts, we would drastically reduce. I would love to be able to give a proportion of how much transmission we would actually stop.
New Zealanders are now enjoying their return to normal life after the last of the country's coronavirus restrictions were removed midnight. And data from Africa Center for Disease Control show that the continent now has 195,875 confirmed cases of the novel coronavirus, 5,334 deaths, and 86,068 recoveries. In Nigeria, the number of coronavirus cases has reached 12,801. Most of these cases, observers say, were spread via community transmission.
Please let us not take our lives casually. I heard that those who live casually may end as casualties. Let us do what is physically, medically necessary to ensure that God does his part.
361 fatalities have been recorded, while 4,040 persons have recovered from the virus. I am Adebola Brooksland Sunday.
Now, the Federal Fire Service is improving on strategic areas of its operations and meeting increasing demand of its services across formations of critical needs in the country. The commitment is coming as the Federal Fire Service inaugurated 10 firefighting trucks to sustain efforts in the protection of lives and property of Nigerians from fire-related incidences. Abubakar Usman Akwanga reports.
Tough moment lies ahead of firefighters in the country as stakeholders in the Interior Ministry spelled out structural and operational frameworks to commemorate groundbreaking inauguration of 10 firefighting trucks. Minister of Interior Rahuf Aregbesola urged the officers to justify government's huge investment in the service and commended them for being proactive to disaster.
To optimize and effectively use these assets to improve fire cover, enhance emergency response operations, and complement state fire services while enhancing fire safety across the country.
The trucks are to be deployed to critical formations of the service across the country to mitigate the impact of fire disaster.
The commissioning of these trucks will enable us to further reduce emergency response time in certain states of the Federation.
Federal government's new focus in repositioning operations of the fire service, stakeholders say, is gradually restoring hope.
So he came and rebranded Federal Fire Service with a new fire trucks. You can imagine acquiring 92 firefighting trucks.
It indicates the commitment of the federal government of Nigeria for the saving of life, of properties, of the citizens.
The procurement and delivery of highly sophisticated and digital firefighting trucks is coming at a time some national critical infrastructure and commercial premises have had fair share of fire outbreak, and the additional reinforcement is to increase capacity of officers to respond swiftly to fire disaster. In Abuja, Abubakar Usman Akwanga, NTA News.
Now talking security, where the Nigerian Air Force has continued its onslaught on the hideouts of bandits at Kwayambana Forest in Zamfara State. Airstrikes being conducted under Operation Accord destroyed armed bandits camps following intelligence report on the bandits' activities in the area. Consequently, the air component dispatched a force package of attack aircraft and helicopter gunships to engage the location, leading to the destruction of the makeshift structures as well as the neutralization of several of the armed bandits. National Chairman of the All Progressives Congress, Adams Oshomole, said all those aspiring for elective positions under the party's platform will be properly and adequately screened to avoid issues on litigation. He disclosed this while inaugurating the screening and appeal committees of the party ahead of a Edo State governorship primary election. The chairman said APC has learned lessons from the last election held in Bayelsa State and will work to avoid past mistakes, hence the composition of credible politicians and members of the academia for the critical re-election duty.
And that is why, as I said earlier, we have tried to learn something positive from that and take maximum precaution to ensure that when we do feed a candidate, if we are going to have issues, those issues should have nothing to do with eligibility or non-eligibility, or with certificate or age or whatever. But the challenge has been, how does a screening committee, as in your case now, or appeal committee, you may only see what the applicant has provided, and on the basis of what is before you, reach a conclusion one way or the other. But there could be information that an applicant or an aspirant may not have provided, and therefore does not come before you. So to cure this gap, we decided to introduce what we call claims and objection and display it in our party office so that members of our party can have access to whatever the aspirants have provided.
Professor Jonathan Ayuba is the chairman of the 7-man member committee and Professor Abubakar Fari is the chairman of the 5-man member committee. The screening exercise is scheduled to commence on Wednesday, 10th June 2020. Now talking sports, Nasarawa State moves to boost sports sector, and Tamara Ibiwe tells us more on sports.